What if the person who raised you wasn't your mother at all? For 30 years, Jenny Nguyen believed she knew who she was until a single hospital test shattered everything she thought she knew about her life. This is the story of a secret buried beneath a mother's love, and the 40-year journey that led a daughter from Vietnam to the father she never knew existed. The secret buried beneath a mother's love. For most of her life, Nguyen Thi Xuan Hong, known today as Jenny, never questioned who she was. She grew up in Saigon, in a comfortable home filled with laughter and love. Her mother, Mrs. Nguyen Thi Xuan, was a respected businesswoman, firm but affectionate. Jenny was her pride, her only child, the one she gave everything for. At 16, Jenny and her mother moved to the United States under the Amerasian Immigration Program, a program that allowed children born to American soldiers and Vietnamese women to start new lives in America after the war. Jenny didn't think much about it back then. She was just happy to be by her mother's side. But then, in 1999, everything changed. That year, Mrs. Xuan suffered a sudden stroke. Jenny rushed her to the hospital, terrified. The doctors saved her mother's life, but out of caution, they recommended Jenny get a brain scan too, in case she shared the same condition. Jenny went through the test, waiting nervously outside the examination room, but when the doctor came out, his words froze her world. "Miss Nguyen, based on the genetic results, it's possible that you and Mrs. Xuan are not biologically related." Jenny could hardly breathe. The walls around her seemed to close in. Not her biological mother? She ran to her mother's bedside, tears streaming down her face. But before she could ask, before she could hear the truth, her mother's condition worsened. Within days, she slipped into a coma. She never woke up. Mrs. Xuan passed away that summer, leaving behind a beautiful home, a loving daughter, and a truth buried forever. At the funeral, Jenny stood in silence. She had always thought that grief came from losing someone, but this was different. She wasn't just losing her mother, she was losing the certainty of who she was. When she brought her mother's ashes back to Vietnam for burial, she wanted to ask her relatives, her neighbors, anyone about her origins. But every time she tried, something inside her stopped her. "I owed her everything," Jenny said later. "She raised me as her own. I couldn't just demand answers." Still, rumors began to swirl. Some said she had been left in a trash bin. Others whispered she had been found in a fruit basket, abandoned on Mrs. Xuan's doorstep. Jenny didn't know what to believe anymore. And yet, beneath the confusion and pain, a small voice inside her whispered, "There's more to your story. The name that changed everything." In August 2002, 2 years after her mother's passing, Jenny returned to Bao Loc, her mother's hometown, to visit the grave. There, by pure chance, she ran into Mrs. Xuan's younger sister, the aunt she hadn't seen in years. When Jenny asked about her past, the woman sighed deeply. Then, with a trembling voice, she said, "There's something you deserve to know." The aunt revealed that decades ago, during the war, a young woman named Han used to work at a small bar owned by Mrs. Xuan near Nguyen Van Thuy Street in Saigon. Han was beautiful, quiet, kind, and only about 20 years old. One evening in 1970, an American soldier came into the bar. Their eyes met. Despite the language barrier, something gentle and real grew between them. He was stationed at Tan Son Nhat Air Base, and whenever he was allowed to leave, he would find his way back to that little bar, and to her. They called each other Kim and Fred. But as the war worsened, Fred was abruptly sent back to the United States. He never knew that Han, Kim, was pregnant. A few months later, she gave birth to a baby girl. Unable to care for her, she left the infant with Mrs. Xuan, asking her to look after her until she could return. "Your real mother came back a few times asking for you," the aunt whispered. But Mrs. Xuan refused. She said she had baptized you, that you were her daughter now. That day, Jenny stood frozen. A name, Han, was all she had. No photo, no address, just a name, a story, and decades of silence. A few neighbors, hearing her story, told her something that sparked a new idea. If you're Amerasian, maybe start by finding your American father. He might know where your mother went. It made sense. Maybe finding her father could lead her to her mother. Jenny decided to search, not just for herself, but for both of them. Over the next several years, she visited countless DNA centers across the United States. She joined every database that specialized in reuniting Amerasian children with their parents. She kept 3 DNA kits in her purse at all times, ready to send samples whenever there was even a glimmer of a lead. Days turned into months, months into years. Each result came back the same: no match found. Until one morning in February 2019, a letter arrived. Inside the envelope, printed in plain black ink, were words that made Jenny's hands shake. Direct paternal match found. Frederick Ashley, 69, North Carolina. She dropped to her knees, sobbing. For the first time in her life, she had a name for her father. The Miracle Reunion. Jenny dialed the number listed on the report. Her hands were trembling so hard she could barely hold the phone. The line rang once, twice, then a voice. "Hello?" She froze. Somehow she managed to whisper, "My name is Jenny. I think I might be your daughter." On the other end, there was silence. Then, the sound of a man crying. Through his tears, he said, "I never knew. I never knew I had a daughter in Vietnam." His name was Frederick Ashley, a retired Air Force officer. He told Jenny that in 1970, when he was stationed in Saigon, he had fallen for a Vietnamese student who went by Kim or Linda. "She was gentle, so soft-spoken," he said. "No dimples, no moles, just a quiet smile I could never forget." He had been young, barely in his 20s, when he was ordered home. There was no goodbye, no letter, just a war that tore 2 lives apart. "I always wondered what happened to her," he whispered. "If only I had known." A few days later, Jenny and her husband packed their bags and drove 12 hours straight from Florida to North Carolina. When they arrived, Frederick was waiting at the front porch, gray-haired, eyes red with tears, holding a small bouquet of flowers. The moment he saw Jenny, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. He didn't speak. He just held her, as if making up for 40 years of lost time. "She's a gift from God," he said later. "We never had children of our own. Jenny is the most special blessing heaven could send us." Inside his home, Frederick showed Jenny his old photographs from Vietnam, faded pictures of air bases, helicopters, and the streets of Saigon. Jenny stared at one photo for a long time. A young woman stood by a bar's entrance, her hair long, her smile soft. The handwriting on the back read, "Kim, Saigon, 1970. Her heart trembled. It could be her mother. Over the next 3 years, father and daughter worked together tirelessly to find Mrs. Han. They shared their story on social media, contacted journalists, and even offered a $10,000 reward for any information that could lead them to her. Several women came forward, their stories heartbreakingly similar, but every DNA test came back negative. Still, Jenny refused to give up. "Maybe my mother had her own pain," she said softly. "Maybe she thought giving me away was the only way to save me." Her father always encouraged her. "Don't stop searching," he would say. "I don't know how much time I have left, but I'll help you until the end." A promise beyond blood. Today, Jenny lives in Florida, not far from her father. On quiet weekends, she often finds him sitting on the porch, eyes drifting toward the horizon, toward a country he once knew and a past he can never forget. They don't speak much about the war or about the years lost. Sometimes, they just sit together in silence, hands intertwined, watching the light fade into gold. Because words aren't always enough. Some bonds are written not in language, but in love, shaped by loss, forgiveness, and time. Jenny's search for her mother continues. Somewhere in Vietnam, perhaps Mrs. Han, now an old woman, still wonders what became of the baby she once left behind. "If she's still alive," Jenny says, "I just want her to know I'm safe and loved. She doesn't have to be afraid anymore." She pauses, smiling through tears. "And if she's gone, I hope she knows I forgive her. Without her, and without the woman who raised me, I wouldn't be who I am." In the end, Jenny's story is a reminder. Family isn't defined by blood, but by the love that survives everything, even distance, even time.